It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Every month or thereabouts on the Happy Families Podcast, we do a non-parenting podcast. We call it Book Club. This is the bit where we kind of forget about all the parenting stuff and we just get into escapism. The books we're reading, the stuff we're enjoying today, that is the day. Kylie, how many books have you got to talk about today? That was a long pause.
That's a really unfair question.
Especially since I know the answer. And the answer is...
Can I include Emilie's school read?
It's a donut. It's a big fat zero, isn't it? No, we can't include you reading a book to the kids.
Yeah, well, we can. So I've read one and I read it to Emilie.
Okay.
Because it was a school read.
Okay. So what does that mean about our book club podcast today? How are you going to do this?
Well, I've decided to be a little bit novel today. I'm going to invite Emilie to come on and talk with me about her read.
A 10-year-old giving a book report on the Happy Families podcast. That's coming up soon. I have read a number of books more than you. Four. I've read 4 books since our last book club podcast. I'm only going to talk about 2 of them. One of them was a religious book. It doesn't really have a place here on this podcast. That was for just my own personal satisfaction. Also read an entrepreneurial book. You know what? I got a couple of really good things out of it, but it was quite poorly written, and overall, I didn't like the book. I just liked a few of the ideas that I got from it. Does that work? Can you say that? Can you say it wasn't a very good book, but I still got some good value from it? Doesn't that make it a good book, or is it just not a very good book, but there were some good ideas in it? I think that I'm right. I think that I can get away with that.
I think that you can, because the reality is it's not a book that you're therefore going to kind of rave about and tell everybody to go out and buy, but definitely got a few things out of it.
Yeah, and entrepreneurial stuff, relevance for our podcast, minimal. So let's talk about the 2 that I did read. I read a novel about the Vietnam War, and I also read a book about parenting, because when the good ones come out, I do like to pick them up and get stuck into them. Which one should we start with?
Well, if you're acknowledging that it's a good book, let's start with the parenting one.
It was a great book. One of the preeminent thinkers of our day is a man from New York University. He works in the Stern School of Business. His name is Jonathan Haidt. Professor Haidt, he came to my attention back when I was studying, and I was looking at the psychology of morality. He used to look at disgust as a psychological experience and got people to talk about why things were disgusting or not. And some of the things that he did are not appropriate to talk about in this podcast because little ears might be listening, but really, really compelling guy, fascinating. Maybe 15 to 18 years ago, he wrote what I still think is one of the best books about happiness on the face of the earth. The book is called The Happiness Hypothesis, and I fell in love with everything he writes ever since then. He's written The Coddling of the American Mind, The Righteous Mind, and he's also recently released something that has just had blanket global media coverage called The Anxious Generation. The Anxious Generation. And it's really a book about what has gone on with well-being with our young people in the last 10 to 15 years. Really, this guy knows how to lay out an argument. I think that this is one of the most influential and important books of the year. So much to love about it in terms of the way he lays out research and explains what's going on, at least his hypothesis around it, the concepts explored, the overall argument made. Really compelling, really engaging. I just love it. There is a reason that Jonathan Haidt is considered one of the most influential academics and thinkers on the planet. But I'm only giving it a 4.5 and not a 5 out of 5. I didn't like it as much as his other books.
Oh.
You sound so enthralled. I've asked you to read the book. What was your response?
Well, I haven't got there. It's just on the pile of books that are waiting, including novels. So it's not even that I am being picky.
Yeah.
I don't have the headspace.
You're not in the reading frame of mind at the moment.
I'm not.
I know.
I'm not.
Well, I gave it a 4.5 because for me, the solutions didn't quite land. It still felt like it was a little bit of, just a little bit unrealistic. I want his solutions to be right. I want his emphasis on keeping kids off devices and restricting their access even when they do get it. All these things, I want them to be right. And I've even set up a website called unpluggedchildhood.org to encourage parents to get on that page. Like, I really believe in it, but I don't feel like he laid out his solutions well enough. And I don't know, the plane still feels like it's up in the air. It hasn't quite landed, or maybe it was a 2-wheel landing rather than a 3-wheel landing. It was a bit of a bumpy landing. Overwhelmingly
But
valuable.
does that necessarily mean it's a bad book, or does that just give you a platform with which, for you as the reader, to work out what's going to work for you?
It's nice when you read a book and the solutions are there.
Well, yeah, because then you don't have to do any thinking yourself.
I think that he's tried to do the thinking for us. But the one thing that I'll give him credit for is he has said, this is tricky and these are the best solutions we've got at the moment. This is a work in progress. So he's quite open about that. And I'm sure that he would probably agree with me. In fact, I've read a couple of articles where he's really openly acknowledged we want more voices in this and we've really got to figure out what's going on. The other thing that I struggled with, and the other reason I brought it down to 4.5, is as much as he laid out his argument brilliantly, explained his position and his hypotheses supremely well, I'm not sure that I agree with. Let me rephrase. It's not about me agreeing. My read of the research is I think that there's more nuance there than he's acknowledging. He's making an argument, and it feels to me like there is a little bit of bias, a little bit of cherry picking of the evidence, and an unwillingness to engage deeply with other explanations, particularly with more recent research. So ultimately, I think he's right. Ultimately, I think we're heading in the right direction with what he's done, and I'm on the same page, but I'm looking for just a little bit more. I'm being very picky. 4.5, still loved it in spite of those limitations, still overwhelmingly valuable, still a fabulous conversation starter, and still a book that I think everybody who has kids who use screens should read. In the same way, I would say the same thing about Johann Hari's Stolen Focus. In fact, I did say that. On the same page, agree with him, but I'm just not sure that the evidence is there yet. Having said that, it took a long time for the evidence on smoking to come through, but everybody knew it was a problem. And I think that's where we are with this screen issue.
Well, you've alluded to the fact that you've got a novel that you've read. The whole reason my reading stopped is because I picked up a novel you recommended.
The Measure. How long will your life be? It's in the box. Have a look at the string.
I think I'm up to about page 42.
I can't believe you're not getting into this one.
Can't get into it. But I honestly think it's just where my headspace is at the moment. So I'm willing to keep pushing through, but it's going to be a long, long journey. Well, so tell me about your book.
Okay, this is not one that I would recommend, but I'm still giving it 5 stars.
Oh.
The reason I wouldn't recommend it is because it's a novel, reads like a memoir about the Vietnam War.
Okay.
And it was just awful to read in so many ways. Brutal and hideous and so senseless, and the profanity and the baseness of it all. The guy's name is Tim O'Brien. The book is called The Things They Carried. And you can just get from the sense of the title, I'm almost getting weepy about it, because the traumatic experiences that the men and women who serve our country in wars, and primarily it was men who were, well, it was almost exclusively men on the front line in the Vietnam War, they came home carrying things. And the first chapter, he talks about all the things that they carried as they went into war, as they flew those choppers into rice paddies and got out under mortar fire, and they were carrying all of these different things. And he talks about how they're carrying this and it weighed this many pounds, and they carried this and it weighed this many pounds. But this guy had that roll and it was this. And you're sort of reading it going, okay, I'm kind of getting it, but where are we going here? And then he starts to open up on these different characters who are in this platoon. Now, like I said, it's a novel, but it reads like a memoir, and he was there. So I think he's drawn very much on his real life experience. Kylie, I found the subject matter mostly awful. I found the coarseness of the language and the stories so hard to take. And yet the beauty of the writing and the way he brings the reader to face the realities of this Vietnam War, or probably any war, I guess, was exquisite. And the way you're drawn into the lives of these 18 and 19 and 20-year-old boys. Because they're just boys who are suddenly carrying rifles, and the responsibility that they carry and their complete lack of preparation for it, and the way they were drafted in. I mean, they didn't want to be there. They didn't know. They didn't choose it. Oh, what a book. What a book. So disturbing. So disturbing.
You talk about the things that they carry, but I'm assuming that the essence of what he's sharing is that the things that they come home with, they're not tangible.
The psychological
the
scars,
weight
the weight of what they carry, the weight of what they come home with.
Can't even compare to the pounds that they were carrying into war.
Yeah, I'm almost in tears talking about it. It really, really, and this guy can write. I mean, the writing of this book is absolutely exquisite. It's called The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. It's kind of an older book now, but I heard about it on someone else's podcast. I thought, I'll grab that. It sounds interesting. And I'm so sorry I did, and I'm so glad I did.
Well, I'm not sure if I'll even have a list to share next month or not.
Not making any promises.
I'm not making any promises.
Might read, might not.
But I do know that Emilie will be a very eager participant should we find ourselves in the same position this month.
Up next, let's find out what the 10-year-old thinks about her school book. Our youngest daughter, Emilie, is homeschooling, and as part of her school curriculum this year, her grade 4 book, or this term, her grade 4 book is, well, we're going to find out in just a sec. I think we've kind of mentioned it in the first part of the podcast anyway. I'm going to step out. Kylie, why don't you take it away and interview Emilie about her book review?
All right, Emilie, I'm putting you on the spot. What have you just finished reading?
I've just finished reading Percy Jackson.
Did you enjoy it?
I loved it.
Well, we're not here to talk about Percy Jackson. We might need to save that for another podcast. What are we going to talk about today?
Today we're talking about James and the Giant Peach.
Okay. What did you love about James and the Giant Peach?
I just really love the illustrations. They're not too perfect and they're not too messy.
So you're a bit of an artist, and what I get from what you're sharing is that it looks like it's something that you could actually emulate. You could try and draw like Roald Dahl. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. What about the story did you like? If somebody hadn't read it, what would you tell them about the story?
I like how the story starts off a little sad because most heroes usually have sad beginnings, and James is no different.
What was sad about his beginning?
His parents passed away, and he's living with his awful aunts.
Oh, their names were?
Spiker and Sponge.
Aunt Spiker and Aunt Sponge. Just the names make you feel yucky, don't they? And what was it about the story that got you really, really excited?
One magical evening, a mysterious man hands James a small bag filled with crocodile tongues.
Crocodile tongues?
Just think Jack and the Beanstalk.
Oh, we're talking about magic beans. What happens next?
On the way back to the house, he tripped on a root of an old peach tree, spilling crocodile tongues everywhere.
I reckon he was going to be really sad about that.
James goes to bed that night feeling so sad, but in the morning, to their surprise, was a giant peach. This is where James's story really begins. He makes some unusual friends and goes on an adventure of a lifetime while making some strange enemies along the way. Spoiler alert, Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker might not make it.
Uh-oh. Well, this sounds like it's a really, really fun book. You read it with me, but do you think that it's a book you could have read on your own?
Probably.
Yeah. If you were going to recommend this to someone, what kind of books would they like to read if they were going to read this one?
Probably not too big books, but not too small.
So this is kind of a middle read. It's not a small novel, but it's not a really big novel.
It's like small chapter books.
Yep. Okay. And what would you give it out of 5? If 5 was like the best book you've ever read and 1 was the worst, what would you say?
4.7.
4.7. This is a good read. You really enjoyed it.
I like how the chapters are nice and short, so if I start feeling a bit like I want to do something different, I can just go finish my chapter really quickly and then I can go do something else.
Amazing. Well, I think we might have to have you back again. How do you feel about that?
A bit more nervous.
Well, thanks for sharing your read today, Em.
You're welcome, and goodbye.
Okay, I think that's everything. Nicely done, Emilie. Well done, Kylie. Love that. I hope that parents enjoyed that. It's a classic, James and the Giant Peach. I feel like I need to read it again. I haven't read it for 40 years.
I don't actually think I ever read it. So it's actually been really fun reading it and watching her come to life as the characters have evolved.
Roald Dahl sales are going up again. Good for him. We hope that you got something out of our book club today. The Anxious Generation, The Things They Carried, and James and the Giant Peach. We'll link to each of those in the show notes. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. If you would like more information about making your family happier, visit us at happyfamilies.com.au. Tomorrow on the podcast, I'll do better tomorrow.